Chair Spain, welcome to the committee, not that you weren't here already. And you have 15 minutes for your group to present, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Thank y'all so much for giving us this opportunity to present. We want to start our presentation off. I want to introduce our first vice chair, who is also a state representative and the assistant minority leader. He's going to start our presentation off with talking about just the fight that we've been in the Deep South. Roger Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know y'all are tired. I've been sitting back there just kind of watching, but it's nice to be with you. I'm State Representative Roger Kirby. We have been through hell over the past 2.5 weeks in South Carolina, and I just want to tell you a minute about what's happened there. Sine die for South Carolina is slated for May 15th. We had on Wednesday, May 14th, the President of the United States called the Speaker of the House, called the President of the Senate, and we found ourselves in a redistricting debate that nobody saw coming at the 12th hour. Mind you, our early voting for our statewide primaries started on Tuesday of this week. The South Carolina House and the Senate were presented a new congressional map statewide from Washington, D.C. that was drawn, y'all remember this name, Adam Kincaid. Adam Kincaid of the National Republican Redistricting Trust. If you're in a state, particularly in a southern state, that's going to be prone to this mid-cycle redistricting, chances are probably real good that Adam Kincaid is going to be your man. Let me tell you what he did. He came into our judiciary hearing to present his map. He took 15 minutes, put it on the board, by video, mind you. He was not there in person. After he finished his 10 minutes, it was time for questions, and he said, by the way, I've got a hard stop at 10 o'clock. Guess what? It was 9:56. Not one member of judiciary even got to ask him a question, a salient question about this map. It went from bad to worse. This map, then, we got into a situation where we had sine die on Thursday at 5. The governor of the state, at the behest of the president, called us back into session on Friday morning. We began Friday morning now, not 2 weeks ago, debating changing our congressional districts for the stated purpose of having 7 Republican representatives. Right now, we have 6 Republican representatives, and we also have what I would consider to be one of the most important figures in Congress, Congressman Jim Clyburn, who represents the South Carolina 6th. I was with Congressman Clyburn when the news came down about this. We were at a Martin Luther King 60-year anniversary for Flood the Ballot Box in Kingstree, South Carolina, small rural area that I represent. I'm a rural representative, you could say, in South Carolina. You know what his comment was, and I'll never forget it. It was nothing about him. He said, protect the process. The process. So when we got back into the House, we began devising how our fight would look. And we made our fight all about the process. And I'll tell you what else. The Republican supermajority House changed the rules on the second day of debate. We had 600 amendments lined up. They were all taken off the desk with a rule that had never been used in the South Carolina House. We went through the following day and a half of debate. It was timed out. The House passed this map, which no South Carolinian had drawn. It was based on 2020 census data. There were even precincts in this map that didn't exist. But because the President of the United States blew his whistle for everybody to go to work and make this happen, we found ourselves there. The Senate was scheduled to come in this would have been last Wednesday, when we finished our deliberations. They came in, they began their debates on Thursday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the Senate debated. Guess what? Sunday and Monday was Memorial Day. Because of procedural rules in the Senate, they couldn't go any further. They had to wait to come back on Tuesday, which was the opening day of our early voting season. South Carolina Democrats put out a clarion call to Democrats across the state of South Carolina to flood the polls, just like Martin Luther King came to Kingstree, South Carolina 60 years ago to do. Let me tell you what the result of that was. Early voting began Tuesday, 2 days ago, in South Carolina. At the end of the day, on Tuesday, there were over 56,000 recorded votes on the first day of our early voting. The record was in a 2024 presidential primary where there were 20,000 votes recorded. We overshot the state record on a daily participation in early voting by over twice. South Carolinians, South Carolina Democrats, 82% of those votes were South Carolinian Democrats flooding the polls. It worked. When the Senate came in and saw the number of votes that were being recorded on the day that they were scheduled to take the vote to pass this, we had 12 Republican senators say, no mas. We've had enough. We handed Trump his ass in a basket on Tuesday. But guess what? It's not over. They're coming back. Congressman Clyburn is the first black congressman for the state of South Carolina in the past 95 years. The only one since Reconstruction. These efforts after Calais that you're seeing across the whole Southeast are designed to take away black representation. You can call it what you want to, but that's exactly what's happening. So the fight is on. This is not the time for you, the DNC, to take away South Carolina's first in-nation primary. It's just not. That's what I got to say. God bless y'all for sitting through my speech and sitting through all of these other ones. It's good to see y'all. I'm honored to be here. I can't wait to go back home and tell my wife and mother that I got to testify in front of Miss Donna Brazile. It's great to see y'all. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Roger. So I'm going to run through our slides really quick. The first slide, the fight for the democracy runs through the South, and so does the White House. This presentation is not about South Carolina keeping a place on the calendar. It's about whether the Democratic Party understands what the fight for democracy actually is. South Carolina is not asking for nostalgia. South Carolina is making a strategic case the road to the White House runs through voters, Democrats cannot afford to lose. This is not a routine calendar debate. Republicans are not debating theory. They're moving in real time to weaken voting rights, redraw maps, dilute black political power, and change the rules when they don't like the voters' choices. Here's a recent example, and Roger just gave you guys that, so I won't talk through that again. But I also want to, oh, my signal went out here. I also want to remind you guys that South Carolina picks winners. This is not luck. South Carolina voters understand coalition politics. South Carolina Democrats have consistently identified nominees who could build broad coalitions like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. Unlike any other early state, we have consistently identified and supported the party's eventual nominee. No early state has a better track record. The point is not that South Carolina voters are perfect. The point is that they're pragmatic because they look like the coalition the Democratic Party needs. South Carolina voters are proxies for Democratic voters across the country. Black voters, working voters, rural voters, seniors, faith leaders, veterans, students, we run the gambit. Let's talk about our flexibility. South Carolina Democratic Party is unique because we're not dependent on a Republican legislature, a Republican governor, a Republican Secretary of State, or a court fight to set the Democratic presidential primary date. That date is set by the South Carolina Democratic Party's Executive Committee, and which I am the chair of that committee. We normally set our date on a Saturday to ensure that our voters have all day to vote. South Carolina voters do not register by party. The state has open primaries, and the voters choose which primary they want to participate in. We also have online voter registration, which all you need is a valid South Carolina license from the DMV to register online. And let me put a finer point on this. South Carolina gives the DNC certainty. No legislative hostage-taking, no governor veto, no unnecessary chaos. We are ready to lead now. Here's why geography matters. South Carolina is big enough to test candidates and small enough for voters to actually meet them. Candidates can reach all 46 counties without needing a billionaire's budget. This rewards organizing, stamina, and message discipline. It's no secret that the potential 2028 candidates are already testing the waters in some states. We have 46 counties in South Carolina, and our voters in 20 of those counties have already had the opportunity to meet potential 2028 hopefuls. Black voters have a voice. Black voters are not a constituency to thank after the nomination is settled. They should help shape the nomination from the beginning. If black voters are the backbone of the Democratic Party, then the calendar should reflect that, not just speeches. No, my pages, sorry. So to talk a little bit about our media market, candidates prefer South Carolina because we have an inexpensive media market. They don't have to have, millions of dollars to get on our media. We still use radio. They can use constituency radio, and that kind of lowers the financial barrier to entry in South Carolina when you start with South Carolina. And South Carolina isn't cheap because we're insignificant. South Carolina is affordable because democracy here is still accessible. Candidates truly get tested in South Carolina. Candidates must campaign everywhere. Our voters live everywhere. We have no big major metropolises where black voters are. You've got to go all over the state to talk to Democrats. You've got to go all over the state to talk to black voters. And let's be honest, the current calendar has not been truly tested, stress test. 2024 was contested, but it was not competitive. It was not a competitive test. There was no wide open nomination field. There was no campaign events. It was all left on the state parties to make this happen. And of course, South Carolina shows up, and we did the heavy lifting. The South is the future, not the past. The South is where we see population growth, economic growth, demographic change, and the front line of democracy. South Carolina remains the nation's fastest growing state, and the National Party should organize where the country is growing and not retreat from it. This year, South Carolina Democrats had a historic candidate recruitment effort. We recruited candidates in all 124 state house seats, all 7 congressional districts, and all 7 constitutional offices. And this effort will ensure that every voter everywhere has an election to go to. And this past Tuesday, as Roger already said, we broke more records with turnout. And like he said, that 56,000 number, 45,000 of those votes cast were Democrats. So that's a huge deal for South Carolina. And when voters saw democracy under attack, they showed up. And that's the South Carolina story. And if Democrats wanted long-term national majorities, we cannot write off the Deep South and then act surprised when the math does not work. This is bigger than one state. This decision is bigger than South Carolina. It's about whether the Democratic Party will stand with the voters who have stood with the party through everything. Will Democrats meet this moment by supporting the communities on the front lines of defending democracy? Or will the Democratic Party tell their most faithful voters they no longer deserve to lead the primary process? And I want to close with this. It's been said by this committee, by multiple members on this committee, that this calendar is about our candidates, and it's about setting our candidates up for success. We often hear conversations about whether South Carolina is competitive in a general election, but respectfully, I think that misses the purpose of a presidential primary. A primary is not supposed to test whether a state will vote Democratic in November. A primary is supposed to test whether a candidate can organize, build trust, raise money, connect with voters, can build the broad coalition they need to win nationally. That is what South Carolina tests better than almost everywhere else in the country. If general election competitiveness alone becomes the standard for early states, then we are no longer building a nominating process around Democratic voters and Democratic coalition building. We are building it around the Electoral College math, and those are two very different things. The truth is, some of the most loyal Democrats in America live in states where Democrats do not always win statewide. Those voters still deserve a meaningful voice in choosing the nominee of this party. In fact, I would argue they deserve even more respect because they continue organizing, they continue voting and fighting for democracy without the benefit of constant national attention or investment. South Carolina is not valuable because it's easy terrain for Democrats. South Carolina is valuable because it battle tests whether candidates can compete for every voter in every community under real political conditions. That is what national campaigns must ultimately do if they want to govern and win. And if the Democratic Party truly believes in expanding the map, strengthening the coalition, and rebuilding long-term power in the South, then we should not move away from the very voters helping lead the fight. And finally, I will put my presidential campaign staffer hat on for just one moment. If we are truly trying to set Democratic candidates up for success, then the early state process must remain accessible. Not every candidate enters the presidential race with the same advantages. Some candidates will be sitting governors, some will hold federal office, some will begin the race with national profiles, massive donor networks, and built-in media attention. Others will not. But if the Democratic Party ever wants to see another Jimmy Carter, another Barack Obama, another Bernie Sanders, another Pete Buttigieg, then the early state window must allow candidates the opportunity to actually compete. Candidates should have enough time to campaign meaningfully in every state. They should be able to travel the state efficiently, meet voters face-to-face, organize in communities large and small, and communicate broadly with voters without required unlimited financial resources. That is exactly what South Carolina allows. If the process becomes too expensive, too media-driven, or too geographically overwhelming, then we are no longer testing candidates or their ability to build coalitions. We are testing who can afford to run. And respectfully, that is not what the Democratic primary should become. South Carolina still rewards candidates willing to do the work, and that is exactly the kind of test this party should want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sabine. Members, the floor is now open for questions and discussion. Please turn your name tents vertically in order to be recognized.
I know y'all are tired.
That's
And
all right.
Bishop would
Andre
probably
T.
agree with the scripture, the last shall be first in the nation.
That sounds very biblical.
Bishop, is that correct?
I need to check the translation.
Who did he call?
Andre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Madam Chair. You've been really responsive to the questions I've had for you before this, about demographics and first versus early. So I want to thank you for all that. But I did tell you that this was one that I would want to ask publicly on the record. So it's about y'all's filing fee and the system related to that. So in your application, it states that the filing fee is $20,000 per candidate, and that the Republicans tend to raise it, but y'all do the minimum required amount. You did mention that you found some legal ways to reduce that burden. I would like to hear some more about that, because $20,000 is a bit of a chunk of change. And then just logistically, since y'all control the date of your election as well, what's the how far ahead is the deadline to pay that filing fee to appear on the ballot as well? Thank you.
Well, the filing period, when people file, will be set by this committee and by some negotiation, as I remember, between this committee and the state party. We have to have filing early enough for instance, overseas ballots, that kind of thing. So it depends on the date of the primary, but and the filing fee is due when candidates come to file. I volunteered to answer this question because that filing fee exists from when I was state chair. Prior to that time, South Carolina if we had a primary or a caucus, the state party had to do it. For the 2008 primary, we worked with the Republican Party to get the state party, to get the legislature to agree to pay for our primary, which is a gracious blessing. When you do that before, if you do it legally and comply with the Voting Rights Act and everything, it's an enormous burden on the party. So, but in order to get the Republicans in the legislature to support having the state pay for the primary, they demanded that there be a filing fee from the candidates. We asked that the filing fee fall on the party rather than the candidates, so that when we go to the state and say, here's our list of candidates to go on the ballot, we are required to give them $20,000 for each of those candidates. Now, for all the years before today, when we get our delegate selection plan approved by this committee, you have granted a waiver to us in order to be able to raise the money from the candidates to do that. Now, we work with those candidates. A presidential candidate, $20,000 is nothing. But if for the state party, if we have 8 or 10 candidates, that's quite significant. But candidates have been willing to do things like help us out by buying a package that includes tables at all our dinners, or that sort of thing. So we will work with them. We don't want to be an unfair burden on presidential candidates. But, and one more thing I will add, there are always a lot of just random candidates who We never heard of him. This guy from Bishopville, South Carolina, decided to run for president. Well, we're on the hook for $20,000 for him if he comes to file. Or you know, somebody, Stephen Colbert, tried to run in South Carolina. So that we would have been on the hook for $20,000 for him. So it's an item that we have to negotiate with all of you, and that we have to negotiate with our candidates. It's a burden the party is not able to get rid of until we take over the legislature again.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, David McDonald, Washington. I want to come back a little bit to the narrative issue. The early state windows are not so much about getting delegates. Historically, they've been small states, retail, with not necessarily many delegates. But what they really are about is what are the messages we're sending to the nation? What's the start of the campaign? Who are the messengers? What's the focus? And in that context, the fact that South Carolina is a historically red state is not necessarily that relevant, it seems to me. The question is, if you're up first, what messages get focused on in the campaign, and how does that resonate in other states because of where people have to campaign, what they have to talk about? How does it filter over, and what does it put into the environment that later resonates and echoes as we repeat it, moving through the narrative and broaden out to the general? So if you could kind of comment on how things communicate out from South Carolina into other states, formally and informally, I would appreciate it.
If I understand your question, David, you know, when South Carolina goes first, the Deep South goes first. Right, that is one of the messages that we have been sharing since we have been elevated to this status, and not just the Deep South, the uninvested South, and that was before the attacks on black political power, and also rural voters and black voters. Like that's the message that we have led with for the last 3 years since I've been in office. And I think more importantly, like I said, South Carolina Democrats are the same as Democrats across the country mostly. Right, and we serve as proxies for these folks. So the issues that we elevate are not going to be too far from what Democrats might want in Nevada. We all want a livable wage. Like we all want to be able to take care of our kids and have health care. Like those issues transcend the states. And I'm not sure if I answered your question right. I was trying to follow it.
My wife says the same thing a lot of times when I ask her something. If she responds at all. But sorry, you partially answered it, but you emphasized the Deep South, and that is not historically, or not in recent history, where we get most of our electoral votes. Yeah. So I'm actually curious about how the issues, particularly with people of color outside the urban cities, may resonate into other areas where we need to get swing votes that are not necessarily high-density urban population centers, where we get Democratic votes, but we don't get the last inch, the last mile that gets us over the top for the electoral votes.
Well, I'll say this too, David. Like when candidates are campaigning in South Carolina, they're getting battle tested. They're testing their messages, and I believe like that is why we continue to pick the winner, because we've talked to these candidates, right? And they test their messages on our actual voters, which resonate across the country because they end up becoming the nominee. And I think that in order for us to get the electoral college math back on our side, we've got, you know, I think that's more than, you know, an early state conversation, but it's about over-investing.
Thank you. All right,
I
Barry?
feel like I missed it, but David's so smart.
Barry Goodman from Michigan. Great sitting near you and Carol and soaking in all the past stories and making us all better Democrats. I didn't ask the question in Nevada if everybody wants to be first. Mm-hmm. You're saying first. Assuming that you're not first, are you still interested in an early window?
Listen, yeah, we're good partners.
Okay.
You know, we're not here to say we're first, we're taking our bike and we're going home. You know, we're going to accept the ruling of this committee. But right now, we are the first in the nation presidential primary state, and so we try to conduct ourselves as such. But yes, we will accept the ruling of this body,
Thank you.
reluctantly.
Thank you. Donna?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I want to thank the committee for such a very important conversation we've had over the last 2 days. You know, I may not know the cost of an apartment, but I do know the cost of a house in Columbia. And the reason why I know the cost of a house is because in the aftermath of a very destructive storm, 2 storms actually, that destroyed my beloved hometown and my state in the Gulf, my brother found himself alone with his wife and 2 boys to come up to my house. And although I was eagerly awaiting my brother's arrival, he stopped in South Carolina. And there, Jim Clyburn and Don Fowler gave him refuge. South Carolina has been their home since 2005. Wow. For me, when we put this state in the calendar, it wasn't just about electoral votes. Some of you have the pleasure of being from California with all those electoral votes, New York, Illinois. But for me, it's about home. And the good people of South Carolina is home. So whether you're from South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, Louisiana, it's Arkansas, you're home. And you represent our value system. You see all of us, not just those who have always been at the table, those who still needed to get to the table, you see them as well. So I thank you. So my question, and I have to tell you, at 2:20, somebody must have known my question for South Carolina. At 2:20 p.m. today, you all entered a memorandum with the government, with the federal government, that you will provide only the data that's public. Mm-hmm. You will not provide the private information of the voters in your beloved state. It will be encrypted, and the federal government cannot share with any other agencies or any parts of the government. So I want to applaud you all for that. But I was in South Carolina this weekend along with Leah and others, and I heard that call, and I was looking for it. I have a brother. He's number 8. I'm number 3. I have never heard my brother, other than tell me what I should, quote unquote, eat or not drink. I've never had my brother preach to me about voting early. And he said he was voting early, along with his wife and his 2 sons. So I want to thank you all for showing that democracy means participation, for showing that democracy is more than just having the electoral votes, but it's having the courage to go where people don't go, to sit with people who normally don't get sat with, and to understand that their pain, whether it's in the rural areas or in urban centers, their pain is our pain. So thank you. I have no other questions because it seemed like your governor finally made some damn sense. And I want to say once again to you, Carol, and Don, who's not here, but I love him. I will always love Don Fowler. Thank you for not just taking care of my family, but all the families that you all have taken care of. And my heart will always be for South Carolina. So you know where I stand. I should have recused myself. But I love you, South Carolina. And I love you, South.
You make me teary-eyed, Donna, but I want to, because I was prepared to answer a question that you asked earlier today, I'm going to answer it anyway. About voter protection and voter intimidation and that kind of thing. I heard the New Mexico governor and somebody else talk about their recent action to keep ICE out of polling places. Well, we don't expect ICE in polling places to be a big issue in South Carolina, but in the 1960s, when black people began voting in South Carolina, voter intimidation in polling places was an enormous issue, and South Carolina passed a law at that time to keep law enforcement out of polling places. No sheriffs, ICE, anybody can come into our polling places because that law is still in effect. And it was not immigrant voters who inspired that law. It was black voters, and over time we've needed it. But so it will still apply this year, even though you didn't ask me, Donna.
Thank you. All right, Wendy?
Thank you. Wendy Davis from Georgia. Quick question. It seems clear that y'all can move the date any place you want, and the Republicans can have a separate date?
Yes.
Thank you.
Not Steph? Steph?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steph Campagnoli in New Jersey. Thank you so much for your presentation. It'd be really funny if I asked something different today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so ready. I got to read my phone. I have the answer because I just could not commit it to memory.
All right, give me rent for Charleston and Florence if you have it.
Charleston is between 1,400 and 2,000, and our representative represents Florence. I didn't look for Florence, so I didn't think you were going to look for it.
Yeah, I have a real estate company as well. What's the question?
What is the average rent for a one-bedroom
In
in
Florence?
Florence? Yes, sir.
Probably around $950 to $1,050.
Thank you so much.
I can get you several of them.
It seems like a great place to visit.
And
but
you didn't ask about Columbia, but in Columbia they stay at my house and Crystal's house. We don't know what to charge.
I've been told Carol's a great cook, so I think you guys should take it up.
Having concluded the real estate portion of the meeting, Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I will stay away from answering the question from the Book of Daughtry, whether the first shall be last and the last shall be first in the nation. But Chair Spain and everyone, I want to thank you all for such a thoughtful presentation. And I know this has been asked before, but not in this presentation. Madam Chair, if you could talk a little bit, because I think how I've seen it at least play out in South Carolina, especially over the course of your tenure, but especially over the last few weeks at the very least. If you could talk a little bit about how this position in the calendar has played into growing the party for you all, and how you could see potentially expanding that growth if you were in that window again.
So one thing I will say, and I've been saying it, like I mentioned in my presentation, that we had historic candidate recruitment. We have 124 state house seats in South Carolina, and we recruited a Democrat for every last one of them. That's right. There were places where there hadn't been a Democrat that run in 40 years. But I say this because it's been because of the 2028, people who have national profiles, who have come into the state. We have made a conscious effort not to take them to Charleston, not to take them to Greenville, not to take them to Columbia. We took them to our ruralest, reddest places, and what we saw were Democrats coming out of the woodworks. The people we had, rural Democrats we have not seen in years. And when it became time for us to start recruiting candidates, we had people we could go to. Like, we have breathed new life into a lot of our counties. So we have used that we've used it for voter engagement. And we use it all around the state, every county, every voter. We've been trying to do that since last June, July. So that's really one of the main things that we've done, is just to make sure that we're using their star power to engage our voters at every level.
Thank you. Indira?
Thank you. I'm Indira De Guerrero from Colorado. Thank you for a wonderful presentation and your speech. Mine is a very generic question. Since 2024, we've seen a big shift in youth vote and the questions that they're asking, how they're engaged and invested about their own future. they're setting the stage for us, essentially, right? And so I want to know how South Carolina Democratic electorate will help with candidates, help them understand the priorities and concerns of younger voters heading into the general elections.
I mean, we've got our young Democrats who are very, very, very active, and we're very supportive of their efforts. But we've also been recruiting young people. Who better to talk about their issues from the microphone than young people? Earlier last year, we elected one of the youngest members we've ever had over in one of the ruralest, blackest counties that we have over in Lee County. Keyshawn Scott was 24 years old when he got elected to the South Carolina State Legislature. So we've not just been trying to engage them, we've been trying to recruit them to run for office as well.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, Frank Leon, DC. A couple of procedural questions. The Democratic and Republican primaries can be on different days. I don't think you have any party registration. How do you keep somebody from voting in both primaries? And or you can, and then I'll reserve for my second question.
If you come and vote on in the Democratic primary, and then you come back to vote in the Republican primary, the poll manager has the same list, and she will say to you, Frank, you're trying to cheat. You cannot vote in this primary because you voted in the other one. And I've seen that happen at my polling place. Okay. So you just can't do it. You have to, the election commission that runs our elections monitors that and prevents it from happening.
Okay, thanks. In your submission, you noted the chair has the ability to place ballot measures on the Democratic primary ballot, providing a rare opportunity to engage voters directly and assess grassroots Democratic support for policy ideas. Have you ever put policy questions on the presidential primary ballot? And is that something you would consider doing? Because it seems it might somehow skew the results too.
We have the ability to do that. The Republican Party always does that. Mm-hmm. I don't believe we have. It may have been done in a state primary some years back, but we like to just keep it clean.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that too. What you was talking about with the Republican Party, what they actually do in South Carolina is, like, for instance, a lot of these things that are floated down here through Project 2025, those will appear on these ballots a year or even two earlier, just so that they can gauge public, where is our public here? And that's the way they do it. That's kind of, we see that. It's crazy stuff sometimes, but yes, they're doing it, we don't.
All right, I think we have concluded all the questions and discussion. Was anyone else that I didn't call on? No. All right. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you
so much
for your excellent
presentation.
Turn it over to you.
Yeah.